his body that can be sinful. Paul's Platonic view then totally ignores the soul's free will as responsible for sin. Man's blaming the body for sin, however, is all but proverbial and Platonic. Like the devil, the body is another scapegoat for man's refusal to accept responsibility for his willing, thinking, and evil doing. The problem of sin is on the soul, not on the body. It is because of this false Platonic view of the flesh, however, Jesus' sinless flesh or body was given all precedence, and his soul's free will given none. There was a big fight over whether or not Jesus even had a human will, the heresy of monothelitism, or one will. Number 5. Since God created the human soul of the man Jesus no different than that of any other human being, what God had to supply in the incarnation was only the body's physical genes, such as every human parent must supply. Mary, of course, supplied her own as well. This fleshly genetic factor is the very meaning of incarnate. Genes, of course, belong to the flesh and not to the soul. So the miracle of the incarnation was God supplying a father's genes, God literally being the biological father of Jesus. That God created a human soul was no miracle. As said, one of the revelations of the incarnation is that God alone creates each human soul, which was not the belief at the time. This fact, however, has been totally overlooked as a major truth God revealed in Jesus' miraculous conception. God alone creating every individual soul, no human father or mother involved whatsoever. What parents supply are the physical genes, whereas life, existence, being itself, all come directly from God and not from the parents. Marginalia, when the faculties of the soul or consciousness cease, does the soul die? Why or why not? These questions are mostly found in my book that's a study guide to this. It's called The Unofficial Study Guide to the Real Christ. There's 500 questions in there, and so you're getting some of those now for free. I wish you could get the book for free, but Amazon won't let me. Number 6, so while the biblical understanding, quote, the Logos became flesh, end quote, incarnation, accounts for a physical body, it does not account for a soul. That the divine form, or soul, took on flesh is a Platonic view. This is why the biblical saying, became flesh, raises the question of whether the Logos united itself only to the flesh or to a human soul as well. For a Platonist, of course, this would have been inconceivable. The Fathers, however, in their creeds and formulations, changed the biblical saying, became flesh, to became man. This way, the human soul could be included, and rightly so. Number 7. But this still leaves the deceptive, misleading word became. The Logos became flesh, or became man. Now anything that becomes something else ceases to be what it was. Thus, if a tree becomes an animal, it is no longer a tree. If an animal became a man, it is no longer an animal. So too, if God became man, it is no longer God. It goes without saying, however, God did not, cannot become anything or anyone. There is no place in monotheism for the uncreated becoming created. It's an oxymoron, and none of the Fathers believed this. As Cyril put it, anyone who believes God can become a human being has a deranged mind. So to say God became flesh or man is blatantly false. God cannot become what God is not, and God is not a human being. The term became should be eliminated from all creeds, doctrines, and Christologies. The term has deceived enough people already. What is meant by incarnation is God creating and uniting to itself man's human nature. God never became human nature or became a human being. God is. God does not become. Number 8. Something else the Fathers' Christology never accounted for was the divine Spirit's indwelling Jesus' human soul. If he had no soul, then of course there could be no indwelling spirit. So if for Paul Jesus was the spirit made visible in the flesh, then how could the spirit indwell in Jesus' soul? For some, the spirit was the divine soul of the man. This is why, for the fathers, the spirit's indwelling posed the question of whether or not it was the spirit or solely the logos that was united to human nature, more especially united to the soul of Jesus. This was another big issue among the fathers, and one that would affect all subsequent Christologies. It raised the question, is human nature only united to the Logos, or is human nature not also united to the Spirit? Anyone who referred to the Spirit's indwelling in Jesus, Cyril accused of denying it was the Logos that was united to human nature. In his view, since the Spirit indwelled in every holy or spiritual person, to say it indwelled in Jesus implied he was no different than some holy soul, or that he was only God's adopted Son and not his only begotten Son. So are we supposed to believe the Holy Spirit did not dwell in Jesus? What nonsense is this? No truth to it at all. So this was another reason why the soul of Jesus was put to the side. The Spirit does not indwell in the flesh, and for Jesus, evidently, not even his soul. The Spirit's oneness with the human soul, then, has no place in the Father's Christologies. Christ's human nature could only be united to the Logos and not to the Spirit, nor even to the transcendent Father. In the light of this view, since the term incarnate is solely a prerogative of the Logos, then Christ could not be considered the incarnation of God, the whole Trinity, but only the incarnation of the individual Logos. Individual Logos. Obviously, the term incarnation gives a narrow, limited view of Christ's humanity. In truth, however, God's whole humanity is eternally one with God's whole divinity, and not just 1/3 of God's divinity. And how about the transcendent, or Father? Jesus, of course, said he was united to the Father, not to the Spirit or Logos. The transcendent is not in any man or in anything created. Rather, all creation is in the transcendent. The transcendent is literally the ground of all being. So this is the question. Is man's ultimate oneness with God only a oneness with the Logos, or is it a oneness with the whole Trinity? A true answer to this would yield a new Christology, one centered in the Trinity and not just on the Logos. The Logos Spirit transcendent, after all, can never be separated. There cannot be one without the others. Man's complete human nature can never be separated from the complete Godhead Trinity. Marginalia, center as the numerator, Spirit as the denominator, circumference as the numerator, Logos as the denominator, arising within the transcendent. Number 9. There is only one divine essence or nature, not 3 natures or essences. And if human nature is united to the divine nature of the Logos, it is also united to the divine nature of Spirit and transcendent. How could it be otherwise? The divine nature of the Logos is no different from the Spirit and transcendent. It is only their distinct modus operandi that differs. As said, the reason the Logos is the medium for the union of disparate natures is because only its modus operandi, divine mode of existence, is existentially united with matter, the body. Without this existential union, nothing created could exist. So it is only through the Logos man could come to an eternal oneness with the Spirit and transcendent. Pausing here, and through him all things were made. Back to the text. Indeed, it is this initial existential union that the indwelling Spirit transforms into an eternal union of God's complete nature with man's completed nature. Christ is the union of man's entire human nature with God's entire divine nature, and not just united to the divine nature of the Logos, as if the Logos was a part of the Trinity. Yet there exists no Christology that takes any of this into consideration. Marginalia until now. Dum dum dum. And I hear some noises on the go.